Hey everyone, welcome back to another featured video in programming fields. I'm Umesh. In our previous videos, we covered Laravel Passport Authentication, including REST APIs for registering users, login, logout, and accessing profiles. And alongside, we also built to-do app REST APIs using Laravel Passport, in which we have covered the full CRUD functionalities. But there is one crucial thing missing in the terms of passport authentication. What happens when your access token expires? Do users need to log in again every time? In this video, we are diving deeper into authentication and exploring an important concept, that is refresh tokens. So these tokens allow users to stay logged in securely without re-entering their credentials every time when their access token got expired. So here is the outline of the today's video that we are going to cover. Firstly, we will start with what are access tokens, refresh tokens, and authorization tokens. And we will see the differences among these all. Next we will see how do they work in Laravel Passport. And next we will see why are refresh tokens important for authentication. And lastly we will discuss about the best practices for secure authentication flows in Laravel. So let's start with what is an access token. So an access token is a short-term credential that proves a user is authenticated. Every time the user make a request to a protected API endpoint, and they must include this token. However, when the token expires, the user will need a new one, and that is where refresh token comes in. Next we will talk about the refresh token. A refresh token solves the problem of short-lived access tokens, and instead of asking the user to log in every time when their token expires, we can use a refresh token to request a new access token automatically. So this refresh token will work when your access token got expired, and in order to stay logged in, you will have to generate a new refresh token. Next we will take a look to the authorization token. So an authorization token is different from an access token, and this is a part of an OAuth flow where users grant access to an application, and this is mainly used for third-party authentication, just like sign in with Google, Facebook or GitHub. Now next we will see a quick differences among access token, refresh token and authorization token. So the access token is just used for API authentication, but the authorization token will be used for the third-party authentication, just like if you are making any application to make Google login, Facebook login or GitHub login. In the terms of lifespan, the access token lifespan will be short-lived, just like 15 minutes to a few hours. But in other hand, for the refresh token, it will be like long-lived. But the authorization token span will be short-lived, and this will be used for only once. Now in the terms of usage, the access token will need to send with every API request, just like bearer token. But the refresh token can be sent to only one API endpoint, that will be for generating a new refresh token. But the authorization token will be used in OAuth flow for the authorization purpose. And access token can be exposed in the front end, but the refresh token cannot be because it will be stored directly in the backend. And regarding the security risk, the access token can be stolen because that will be stored in the front end. But the refresh token cannot be stolen because this will be stored in the backend. And the authorization token will be used once and then it will be discarded, so it cannot be stolen. Now that we understand the differences among access tokens, refresh tokens and authorization tokens. Now in the next step, let's move on to the how access token actually works. So let's try to understand this using this flow. In the step 1, here when the user will try to log in your application, so user will need to enter email and password. And when user will send the login request to the server will return the response back in the terms of access token. Now for making another API request, you will have to just pass that access token. So in the step 2, when you will make another API call, you will have to pass the access token in the headers as a bearer token, and then you will receive the API response. Okay. So this is the normal flow of access token. Now we will see how the refresh token works. So in the step 3, So in order to generate the refresh token, you will have to pass previous refresh token along with the access token. So when you will make the API request in order to generate new refresh token, you will have to pass the current refresh token. Then the server will process that and it will generate the new refresh token and new access token. Alright, I hope this flow is clear for you. Now we will quickly jump to the practical part. So I'll be navigating to the VS Code editor, and here we have the application setup. So in the previous videos, we created the Laravel Passport Authentication, in which we have covered user register, login, profile access and logout functionality. Also we created the REST APIs for managing the to-do app CRUD applications. Okay, so here we have the to-do controller, and for managing the authentication we have the auth controller, in which we have created the functionality just like register, login, user profile access and logout. Okay, and if we navigate to the postman tool, here we have the login request, and currently if we'll check out, when we make login API request, in the response this just returns token. So this is basically access token. Okay, now alongside this access token we have to generate the refresh token as well. So firstly we will have to modify the login functionality. So I'll be navigating to the auth service, because we have followed the repository and service design pattern. So I'll be navigating to the services. We have the auth service. Inside this we have the auth register, user login, user profile, logout and get auth user function. So in the user login, let me talk this first. Firstly we checked if user is not authenticated, then this will return false, and further we processed with the creating access token. So here we don't have to generate the access token only, instead we will have to generate the refresh token. So I'll be navigating to the browser and I will go with the Laravel official documentation. So I will type Laravel Passport Authentication, and here we have the very first link of Laravel official documentation along with this passport. So inside this official documentation of the passport, if you will scroll down, under this issuing access tokens we have the requesting tokens. Let's navigate to this. This is for authorization, so we don't have to check this now. We'll go down. And here we have the password grant tokens. Inside this has given one command, so we'll have to execute this command in the terminal. But before executing this command, we will have to enable one feature in the app service provider in the application. So in the boot method, we will have to enable this password grant functionality first. So firstly you will have to copy this line. You will have to come to the application, and in the providers, here we have the app service provider. So inside this app service provider, under the boot method, we will have to paste that line, and we will have to import the passport facade here. This is done. So this will enable the password grant type in our Laravel application. Now let's stay ahead to the documentation and let's copy this command. Let's navigate to the terminal. Let's paste it here. Let's hit enter. And here this asked, what should we name the password grant client? So this can be any name here. Just for the simplicity, I'll just provide my to do app client. Okay. Next, it asked which user provider should this client use to retrieve users. So this is optional. Here we just want to assign this client for every users. So I'll go with the default option and I'll simply hit enter. Okay. This has generated client ID and client secret. So we'll have to copy this client ID and client secret for making the API call for generating the access token. So let's copy one by one. Firstly, I'll copy this client ID. I'll navigate to the application. In the .env file,
At the bottom, I'll just define one variable just like client ID. I'll paste that. I'll duplicate this variable. I'll copy the client secret from here and I'll replace it here. I'll change the variable name to client secret. This is done. Let's close this .env. Now in the next step, we will have to change the login function for generating the access token and refresh token. So Laravel Passport provides a couple of routes in order to generate the access token and refresh tokens. So here this has given one endpoint as OAuth/token, and this we can check in the route list. So I'll come to the terminal again, and here I'll just type php artisan route:list. Yes, in the route list we have a couple of routes added by Laravel Passport. We have this post method OAuth/token endpoint, and this is for issuing the access and refresh token. So we'll have to trigger this endpoint from our login function, and for triggering this API endpoint, I will be using HTTP methods. So Laravel provides this Gazelle HTTP. So simply I'll copy this snippet. I'll navigate to the code editor. Inside this user login function, after this auth check, I'll paste that. And here we will have to import this HTTP. Inside this post method, we will have to pass the API endpoint. So this endpoint will be OAuth/token, but here this will be our base URL of the application. So better I'll just use URL helper function, and I'll wrap this OAuth/token here. Now this parameter grant type will be password, because we have generated the client ID and client secret for the password authentication. Now regarding the client ID and client secret, we will have to replace it with .env variables. So I will just call the env function here, and here I'll just call that variable name as client ID. Same thing for the client secret. Okay. Now regarding this username and password, this will come from the login API request. So we are already getting the request, email and password. So that we will have to add it here. So I'll add request email and request password. This is done. Now before returning this response, I'll simply add dump and die response JSON. I'll navigate to the Postman tool. I'll just resend this API request. In the preview, yes, we received the response as token type bearer. We have the expires in time, this is in seconds, and next is generated access token and refresh token. So we will have to extract these parameters before returning this to JSON. So I'll navigate to the code editor again, and here I'll just remove this dump and die, and I'll just capture this response in a variable as auth response, and here I'll just add if condition, if not empty auth response, then I'll move this entire response inside this, and here we don't need this create access token again, because that we are getting from this auth response. So I'll simply comment this line, and here we will extract the access token from this auth response. We have the key as access token. Okay, I will add few more key just like token type, and again we will be extracting this from auth response token type. Also we will add this expires in time here. Okay, and also this refresh token. This is done, and for the else part I will return empty response just like this. Okay, this is done. Let's navigate to the Postman again. Let's click on send request. Yes, we received the response. We have the details just like token type bearer. We have the expires in time. We have the access token and refresh token. So we received the expected response here. Okay, this is correct. Now for making further API call based on this access token, we will have to copy this, and if you want to fetch the authenticated user data, we will have to add that access token here. I'll just click on send. Yes, we received the authenticated user data. So in the login response, we received the expires in time here. So this expires in time is basically for expiring the access token. Alright, so we can customize this in the app service provider itself. So for this, Laravel Passport provides a function. If we'll come to the documentation again, and here you will have to scroll to top. Inside the configuration, we have the token lifetimes. Let's navigate to this. Here we have the tokens expiring time. Okay, so we have to set the expiry time for the access token. Further, we have the expiry for the refresh token and personal access token as well. So firstly, we will add the expiry for the access token only. Let's copy this function. Let's navigate to the code editor again. Again, we will have to navigate to the app service provider. In the boot method, I will add the expiry for the access token, and we can add the time here. This is 15 days. We can set it for minutes, hours, seconds or days. So as of now, I will just add minutes, and in the minute, I will simply add 1 minute. Let's come to the Postman again. Now we will have to generate a new access token because we have set the expiry time for new token. So that will be applied on new tokens only. Let's resend this login request. Yes, we got the token, and here this expiry time is 60 seconds, that is for 1 minute only. Now let's copy this token. Let's try to make the another API call for the profile data. Yes, we got the response. Now if we'll try this token after 1 minute, this will say unauthenticated because that token will be expired. Let's recheck now. Still this is active. Let's wait for a minute. Yes, now we can see this said unauthenticated because after a minute that token got expired. Now in order to generate the access token again we will have to log in this API, but actually we don't want to log in this again. Instead, we will just refresh this token, and in this flow we don't want to trigger the login API in order to generate a new token because we don't want to issue the fresh tokens, only we want to refresh the existing session so that based on that token we can maintain the login session in the front end or in our mobile applications. So next we will be working on the refresh token functionality, and for this we will have to create a new function and one API endpoint. So based on that API endpoint, we will be making one API request, and from there we will be getting the newly generated refresh token and access token. So I'll come to the code editor first. Inside the controller, we have the auth controller. Inside this, I will create one more function, and this will be for refresh token. Okay, let's define the function as refresh token. Let's add try and catch block again. For the catch block, I'll simply copy these two lines. I will paste it here. I'll change the log message as exception occurred while refreshing the tokens. Okay. Now in the try block, again I'll call auth service. So I will be using $this auth service refresh token, and we will have to define this function inside auth service. Let's copy this function name, navigate to the auth service, and here I'll define this function. Okay. Now inside this function, we will have to trigger the API request again. So we'll be navigating to the documentation again. I'll scroll to top. So inside the issuing access tokens, we have the refreshing tokens. Okay. And again, this has given the same endpoint as OAuth/token, but the grant type will be refresh token. So let's copy this snippet and let's jump to the code editor. Let's paste that function. Let's remove this URL, and here we will have to use the URL helper function. This grant type will be refresh token. This is fine. Now here we will have to get the refresh token, and we will have to capture this refresh token from this API request. Okay. So we will have to capture this just like request refresh token. Let's capture this request variable from here. Again, this client ID and client secret will be same. We will have to call it from env client ID, env client secret. Okay. And here I'll just put dump and die response JSON. I'll navigate to the auth controller, and here I'll just add request and its object, and let's pass this request here. This will accept parameter as illuminate HTTP request, and this will return the response in the JSON. So we'll copy it from here. Okay, this is done. Now in order to execute this function, we will have to create one API endpoint. So we'll navigate to the API route. Okay, and inside the auth middleware, I will just create one route as post route. Okay, this will be refresh token, and here this will call the auth controller refresh token function, just like this. I will name it refresh token. This is done. Let's copy this endpoint, navigate to the postman, and here in the new tab, let's paste this, and here we will have to add the base URL. So I'll copy this from here. I will paste it. Let's change this method to post. In the headers, we'll pass the accept application/JSON. In the auth, we will have to pass the bearer token, and we will change this from here. But for this, we will have to generate the token again because this token got expired. So as of now, I'll just increase this expiry time inside the app service provider. So instead of 1 minute, I'll set this to 5 minutes. You can customize this according to your need. I'll come to the postman again, and here I'll just resend this login API request. Yes, the new token has been generated. I'll copy this access token. I'll come to this refresh token endpoint, and here I'll just add bearer token. Okay, and now in the body, we will have to pass the refresh token as well, because after generating the new access token, along with the access token, this has generated the refresh token as well. So let's copy this refresh token. We'll have to pass it in the body. We can pass it in the raw or in the form data. This is up to you. So as of now, I will simply choose the raw format, and I'll select this JSON. Inside the JSON, I will just add one key as refresh_token, and here in the double quote, I'll just paste that. Okay. So here for generating the refresh token, we have passed the existing refresh token, that means the current refresh token, alongside the bearer token as well. Alright. Now let's try to send the API request. In the preview, yes, here we got the response as token type bearer, and here this has given the same response as we received for the login response. So we have the access token and refresh token. So basically this has triggered the API, and based on the given token, just like access token and refresh token, this has reissued the access and refresh token both. Alright. Now let's return this response in the JSON format. So let's come to the auth service, and here I'll just copy the above response, this one, and here I'll just paste it. Okay. I will just capture the response as auth response, and also I'll add if condition, if not empty, auth response. Then I'll just move this return inside this, else this will return the empty response. This email is not required, only we need token type expires in access token and refresh token. This is done. This is capturing parameter object, and this is returning array response. Okay. Now let's come to the controller, and here we will have to capture the response. So better I will just copy the response from here. I will paste it. Let's capture this response, auth response. Okay. And here in the data we'll have to pass the auth response. Okay, this is done. And here we will have to put the validation, because we have passed the refresh token in the parameter. So we have to make sure if the refresh token is added, then only this API request will be working. So we can create a separate form request, or we can manage it from here. But in our login and register functions, we have created a separate form request in order to validate the request data. Okay. So better for keeping the consistency, again I will just create another form request for this refresh token. So I'll come to the terminal, I'll clear this, and here I'll just create one more form request as make request refresh token request. Let's hit enter. Yes, the refresh token request has been created. So we will be injecting that refresh token request here. This has been imported. Let's update this. Okay. Now let's navigate to this refresh token request, and let's authorize this to true. Inside the rules, I will add refresh token to be required string. Alright. And regarding the validation error, we can copy it from the previous requests. Let's copy this and let's paste it here. Let's import these namespaces, and this will be from contract validation. This is done. Okay. Now let's come to the postman, and here I'll just remove this parameter. I'll try to click on send. Firstly it said unauthenticated because that token got expired. So we will have to generate the new token. Let's copy this access token first. Let's add it inside the auth bearer token. Let's try to click on send, and this said yeah, the refresh token field is required. Now we will have to add it inside the body in the form of a JSON. So I will add refresh token and I will paste it from this login response. Okay. And if you try to send the request, yes, we got the response as new token and the refresh token. Alright. Now if you try to check the another API request, just like login profile based on your previous access token, let's try to copy this and let's try to make the profile user details API request, and if you try to click on send, this said unauthenticated because this has overridden the previous access token, and based on that this has generated the new access token. So now for making the further API calls, you will have to pass the newly generated access token. Let's copy this. Let's add it here. And let's try to click on send. Yes. Now you are able to get the profile details based on the newly generated token because the previous access token got expired and it got revoked from the user. So this is done. So we have successfully implemented the refresh token functionality in Laravel Passport. Now we will talk about why token revoking is important. So when implementing authentication, we should always include a logout function that revokes tokens because this improves security and ensures that old tokens cannot be misused. That's why we need to log out the user and we will have to invalidate the existing tokens. So this prevents the unauthorized access to the user accounts. And here for making the further API calls, again you will have to use the newly generated tokens. Now we will talk about the best practices for secure authentication. So for making the secure authentication, you will have to set the short expiry for access tokens, just like 15 to 30 minutes or less than that, so that the user will need to generate the new token by calling that refresh token API. And you will have to secure the refresh tokens in HTTP only cookies, so that this will prevent the cross scripting attacks. And always revoke the tokens when users log out, and that we have already covered in the previous videos. And that's it. Now you understand how access tokens, refresh tokens and authorization tokens work alongside their differences. And also we saw how to implement a secure refresh token flow in Laravel with Passport authentication. Now I want to hear from you what topics should we cover next, and you just drop a comment below with your suggestions and I'll create a video based on your request. And if you find this tutorial helpful, hit that like button and subscribe the channel. And also don't forget to share this video with your fellow developers. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy coding.